Snyder fan or Snyder cultist, I have 10 ways to tell you who you're dealing with and more importantly, whether or not you are a Snyder fan or a Snyder cultist. And if you get 7 points or more out of 10, you are indeed a Snyder cultist. So we're going to start off with the easy ones, but don't be surprised if you get points even if you're not a Snyder lover. Number one I have right here, are you refusing to see the new Superman movie because the Snyderverse wasn't finished? Okay? If you're refusing to see it because the Snyderverse wasn't finished and you answered yes, then give yourself 1 point towards being a Snyder cultist. Number two, have you ever said that the premise of Superman should be retired with Henry Cavill? Have you ever said that the premise of Superman should be retired with Henry Cavill? If you have said yes, then give yourself 1 more point towards being a Snyder cultist. Again, these are the easy ones. And yes, I've had people tell me this in the comments before. People are definitely out there thinking that Henry Cavill is Superman, and if there is someone else playing Superman, they shouldn't even deserve to do it because it's not Henry Cavill. Kind of reminds me of the Christopher Reeve, can we call him cultist? Reeve cultist, from days of past, which may have hurt the Henry Cavill movies. I don't know. Number three, do you like the stories that explore what happens if Superman turns evil? Do you like the stories that explore what happens if Superman turns evil? If you answered yes, give yourself another point for being a Snyder cultist. Now, I actually have to give myself a point on this one because I do kind of like to explore it, even though I don't like those stories. But the Snyderverse was very much moving towards directly, an Injustice-style Superman, which was never clear whether or not the future that we were seeing was coming from some sort of alternate universe or if Henry Cavill's Superman was in fact going to snap. And that was one thing a lot of not Snyder cultists didn't like about those movies, is it seemed like the inevitable was that Superman was eventually going to be the exact opposite of what they wanted him to be. So definitely give yourself a point if your answer was yes. Number four, are you willing to put Superman 2025 tickets in your cart but not go through with the purchase to hurt the new movie? If you answered yes, you're willing to do that to keep this new movie from doing well, you are definitely a Snyder cultist, and actually you should probably give yourself like 6 points, but I'm trying to make it fair. I just did 1, but that is crazy. There are actually people out there who are promoting the idea of doing whatever they can to hurt this new Superman. Even though this new Superman may meet what the qualifications for possibly more than the majority say what Superman should actually be, they're willing to just kill it because that's just not what they want. That's definitely not a Snyder fan mentality. That is a Snyder cultist mentality. Number 5, are you constantly putting hashtags wallets closed on positive videos? If you are, definitely give yourself a point. I see the wallets closed things. I wouldn't say all the time. The movement isn't as strong as people think it is. I think there's thousands of them out there, but I don't know. My voice cracked like a little kid, but I don't know that there are millions of them out there. I really like what I'm seeing in my comments is that, there are definitely people that don't want it, that aren't going to spend their money on it. But it's not as big as some of them may think it is. So if you are putting hashtag wallets closed on positive speaking videos, give yourself a point. Number 6, have you ever labeled someone a gun goon? A gun goon. If you have labeled somebody a gun goon, you should definitely give yourself a point. I don't know how old this term is. I don't know where it came from, but I have been called a gun goon and a Snyder cultist, depending on which video you watched. I like to think that's because I might be a little bit unbiased towards directors and actors. I very much love Superman, but because I love Superman, that can also make me not like much parts about a movie or like parts about movies. So to me, I think I'm just kind of as unbiased as I possibly can be. So if you've labeled somebody a gun goon, give yourself another point, because that is only a term a Snyder cultist would use. Do you have issue with Superman killing General Zod at the end of Man of Steel. Do you have issue with Superman killing General Zod at the end of Man of Steel? If you said no, maybe give yourself a point towards Snyder Cultists, because most true Superman fans say that Superman should never kill. I'm actually having to give myself a point for this one, because when Zod, I had a lot of problems with Man of Steel movie. I love that movie. But when he killed Zod, that was one area everybody had a problem with, where I was like, no, that makes sense. I kind of assumed that later he would realize I don't want to kill, and maybe he'd have a lot of guilt for destroying his, only last members of his planet. But I even thought the next movie might be called Last Son, because that would be appropriate. That's not what happened, but I don't have any issue with him killing Zod, so I'm having to give myself another point towards Snyder Cultist. Number 8. Do you, or did you, feel like Henry Cavill should have been James Gunn's Superman? So whenever Henry Cavill announced that he was going to be Superman again, and James Gunn, as far as I know, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but as far as I know, James Gunn was, gave him the clear, hey, yes, you can announce that you're Superman again. Do you feel like Henry Cavill should have been the new Superman, or are you glad he took it a different direction? Okay, if you think that he should have been the new Superman, go ahead and give yourself a point, yes, towards Snyder Cultist. I'm having to give myself another point, because even though now I'm okay with the way things are, I was pretty upset that Henry Cavill did not get to finish out his version of Superman, because I don't believe that Henry Cavill's true version of Superman is even in the Snyderverse movies. I don't think he's ever really gotten to do what he wants, because I heard him talk about Superman, and I've seen him play Superman, and they just don't match up very well. Okay? So if you think that Henry Cavill should have been James Gunn's Superman, give yourself a point, yes, towards Snyder Cultist. That gives me another point towards Snyder Cultist. Even I didn't think I'd be getting this many. Did you start hating Gunn and his movies the moment it was announced he was taking over the DCU? So did you start hating Gunn when it was talked about that he was going to be taking over the DCU? Because a lot of people, I don't think, had any problem with Gunn at all, and may have very well been Marvel fans and everything else up until the point that their boy Snyder no longer got to do his vision. So if you feel like you started hating Gunn, which, who's going to answer this honestly, seriously? Like, who's going to be like, yes, I'm biased and I didn't, I don't think anybody's going to do that. But if you feel like you started hating Gunn and his movies when Snyder was no longer able to do that and Gunn took over, give yourself a point, yes, towards Snyder Cultist. Now, the last one is one that it's a question I pulled from looking at all of my polls and all of my comments and everything else, because I don't understand this one. So this may be a biased question. But do you think this movie is a failure? The new Superman movie, Superman 2025, do you think it will be a failure if it makes less than $1 billion? If you think the movie's going to be a failure because it makes less than $1 billion, give yourself a point towards Snyder Cultist, because honestly, I don't even expect it to make $1 billion. A movie with no huge names in the main cast that is a first movie of a new series rarely ever makes $1 billion. They usually have to have big names involved, or they have to have previous movies that will get people from other areas to come see it that wouldn't have seen it otherwise. This is a totally new restart. Now, you could argue that Superman is, not, it's like not new. It's, but Superman's been done so many times, it's kind of where we're at. You're going to have something from the past or big names or something to help it. So I don't really expect it to make $1 billion. I expect it to do really well, but if you think $1 billion is what it takes to if it's less than $1 billion, you get to call it a flop, give yourself a point towards Snyder Cultist. Don't forget to put your score in the comments. What you got out of 10? My score was 3 out of 10. So I was actually surprised that I didn't get a 0 out of 10 on this, because I don't consider myself a Snyder fan at all. I'm not a Snyder guy or a Gunn guy. I'm not a director guy or an actor guy. I just love Superman. I just want to see more Superman. Now, I will probably have problems with this new movie, but I've had problems with them all. So I'd kind of expect that. What I'm not going to do is use nitpicky little nonsense like the bagginess of the suit or Henry's ears. I'm the only one that talks about this. He's got weird ears. I'm not going to use that stuff to say that it's going to be a bad movie. But I do love Henry Cavill, and I do feel like it is possible to love Henry Cavill and be excited for this new movie. If you want to see how that's possible, I talk about that in this video right here to kind of help people realize, guys, we can love Henry and we can love David. It's possible. You can do it.